My name is Becky, I'm 31 years old, and I've been dating Arthur for 2 years. That evening, we were sitting in the opulent, expensive leather-scented interior of his black Ferrari, parked right in front of my house. We were both staring silently at the elegant invitation card lying in his palm. Dinner. With his family. Arthur noticed my tension and smiled his famous, disarming smile. "They'll absolutely love you, Becky, don't even worry," he said confidently, trying to ease my anxiety. But it wasn't just nerves about the introduction. My gaze was fixed on the name of the restaurant, embossed in gold, La Serafina. The most exclusive and absurdly expensive establishment in the entire city. At that moment, in the silence of that luxury car, I could have told him everything. I could have casually mentioned that I had $8 million sitting in my trust fund. I could have mentioned that the fortune my grandfather left me was so substantial that his family's vaunted wealth would look like modest savings in comparison. But once again, I said nothing. Instead of revealing my hand, I just nervously tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. I decided to play the role he seemed to expect from me at that moment, the role of a slightly intimidated girlfriend. "Arthur, what if they don't like me?" I let a note of genuine insecurity slip into my voice. "What if they look at me and decide I'm, well, not good enough for their family?" Don't get me wrong, this wasn't just coyness. Life had taught me several very expensive and painful lessons about exactly how money changes people. My ex-boyfriend, for example, suddenly became incredibly interested in marriage the exact moment he accidentally found out about my bank account balance. And the one before him immediately started planning our future together, which, coincidentally, consisted of endless luxury trips that I, of course, would be funding. So, when I literally ran into Arthur in the large city park during a morning jog, I made a firm decision. To him, I would just be Becky. Becky, a public relations specialist at a small firm, making her own way in life. Not Becky the millionaire with an 8-figure trust fund. Arthur fell in love with the woman I pretended to be. The Becky who brought her lunch to work in Tupperware and hunted for sales at Marshall's. He insisted, with chivalrous persistence, on paying for everything, genuinely believing I was barely making ends meet. All those spontaneous weekend trips, dinners at trendy places. He covered absolutely every expense, acting like a true gentleman, and sometimes even delicately helped me cover part of my rent when he thought I was in a tight spot. And, if I'm being completely honest, I loved feeling that care that, for the first time in my life, had no ulterior motives behind it. But this dinner wasn't just a dinner. Meeting his family meant I had to enter their world. And in their world, there were unwritten rules that I, unfortunately, knew all too well. Old money families had an almost animal instinct. They could sniff out those they contemptuously called gold diggers from a mile away. They had a whole system of tests, sometimes subtle and barely noticeable, other times blatantly rude, but all serving one purpose, to determine your true worth. Well, if they were looking for a stereotype, I decided to give them exactly what they were expecting. I spent half the day not in discount stores, but in the gaudiest boutique in the mall. I deliberately chose a dress that screamed, "I'm trying too hard to look expensive." It was made of bright red faux silk, fit too tightly, and had a neckline that was far too deep, the perfect outfit to attract stares, not respect. It was catastrophically inappropriate for the understated luxury of La Serafina. To complete the look, I found the highest stilettos I could find, gilded, with multiple straps, painful even to stand in. And the cherry on top was a flashy knockoff designer handbag, with a logo that was too big and too shiny to be real. The person looking back at me from the mirror wasn't the real Becky, not the confident woman who, truth be told, could buy La Serafina outright and not even notice the expense. Instead, there stood a tacky, slightly frightened girl, desperately trying to impress. She was a caricature of someone who clearly did not belong in their refined, exclusive world. Arthur, always punctual, picked me up at 6 p.m. sharp. When I opened the door, his eyes visibly widened, just for a fraction of a second, as he took in my ensemble. "Becky, you look stunning," he said, but I caught that micropause, that barely perceptible hesitation in his voice. He was too well-mannered and kind to tell me I looked, to put it mildly, gaudy for the understated luxury of La Serafina. But I couldn't help but notice the quick, puzzled glance he threw at my gilded stilettos. I tried really hard to look nice for your family, I said with the most innocent smile I could muster, pointedly adjusting the massive, flashy hoop earrings I'd bought specifically to complete the look. This time, the ride in his car didn't bring its usual peace. The tension was almost palpable, hanging in the air like static electricity. Arthur, usually the picture of calm, was on edge. His fingers drummed a nervous rhythm on the steering wheel every time we stopped at a light. This uncharacteristic fidgeting gave him away completely. "Remind me again, what are they like?" I asked, trying to keep my voice soft and a little timid. I'd heard the descriptions 100 times, but I needed to maintain the act. He took a deep breath, collecting his thoughts. "Well, Mom, Eleanor, she's very influential. She was the editor-in-chief of a major art magazine for years. She notices everything." "And your father?" I prompted. "Dad, Henry, runs a large investment fund. He's the kind of man who's used to everything going his way. And then there's Olivia." "Your sister," I nodded. "My twin sister," he clarified, a warmth creeping into his voice. "She's married to a very successful corporate lawyer, they have 2 kids, live in a prestigious suburb. She and Olivia are very close." When we finally pulled into the impeccably lit parking lot of La Serafina, where a valet immediately rushed to our door, Arthur turned to me. "Listen, Becky," he began, a serious note in his voice. "They can seem a little intense. Let's just say, they're very protective of me. They're not used to having someone this important in my life." He took my hand in his, squeezing my fingers tightly. "But it doesn't matter. Just be yourself. As soon as they get to know you, they'll understand why I love you. They'll see what I see." I nodded, my heart pounding, not from fear, but from anticipation. The show was about to begin. La Serafina was filled with that special, solemn hush characteristic of very expensive places. This time, the atmosphere felt a bit foreign and intimidating, not as I remembered it. The design was the epitome of restraint, no ostentatious glitter, just dark-toned velvet on the walls, dark wood floors polished to a mirror shine, and waiters gliding silently through the room in their white tuxedos. The restaurant's manager, whom I, of course, recognized instantly, spotted me at the entrance. When he saw me in that outfit, a fleeting look of astonishment crossed his eyes. But he was a consummate professional. The mask of polite deference was back on his face the second Arthur gave his surname. "Of course, Mr. Henderson. Your family is already waiting. Please, follow me." We were led to a spacious, semicircular booth in a quiet alcove, where 3 people, exuding an aura of understated confidence, were already waiting. Eleanor, Arthur's mother, was a woman with an impeccable silver coif. She wore an ivory-colored cashmere cardigan and discreet, but clearly very expensive, jewelry. Henry, the father, looked like a man accustomed to making decisions. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored sports coat. Olivia, the twin sister, was a chiseled, polished version of her brother, dressed in an elegant silk dress. They rose politely as we approached. And in that moment, I felt their intense, appraising gazes on me. They were carefully studying my look. I could literally feel their eyes clocking my too bright red, the overly daring cut of the dress, and the excessive shine of my shoes. Eleanor's smile was a model of civility, but her eyes remained completely impartial. Olivia gave my dress a quick glance that clearly read as disapproval. Henry, ever the businessman, first warmly shook his son's hand, then turned to me with an unreadable expression of professional courtesy. "So, you must be Becky," Eleanor said in a smooth, melodic voice, extending her manicured hand. "Arthur has told us about you." Her intonation was flawless. She hadn't said a single rude word, but with that "about you," she had clearly communicated, and we are, to put it mildly, surprised by his choice. I immediately switched into Cinderella at the ball mode, letting my voice become softer and adding a tremor of nervous awe. Oh, Mr. and Mrs. Henderson. Olivia. It's such an honor. Arthur has told me so much about you, I'm just so happy to finally. My voice cracked, right on cue. Then I turned my gaze to the interior, deliberately widening my eyes and letting my mouth fall slightly open, feigning reverence. My goodness, this place, it's just incredible. I've never been anywhere this fancy, this elegant in my entire life. It's like something out of a movie. I made a point of doing an exaggerated, slow scan of the room, like a tourist who'd just stumbled into a palace. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught the trio exchanging quick, subtle glances. It was the look that screamed, she's one of those. A shadow of a smirk flickered across Olivia's lips, which she immediately hid behind her water glass, a clear cocktail of amusement and superiority. La Serafina is something of a family tradition, Olivia said in a velvety, patronizing tone. We thought for a special introduction it would be an appropriate venue. Arthur, true to form, pulled out my chair for me. I didn't miss the chance and made a whole performance out of it. I pressed my hand to my chest in exaggerated delight. Oh, Arthur. You are such a true gentleman. I cooed, intentionally raising my voice just enough to be heard beyond our table. I noted with satisfaction how a couple at the next table turned to look at my loud compliment. I also caught Eleanor flinch almost imperceptibly, her polite smile freezing for an instant, as if from a sharp noise. As soon as we were seated, a waiter materialized silently beside us, handing us menus. Each was the size of a small atlas, bound in heavy leather. I opened it and immediately, instinctively, pulled back a little, as if expecting the numbers on the right side of the page to bite me. Wow. I whispered, but the whisper was loud enough for the whole family to hear. I didn't even know food could cost this much. You needn't worry about that, my dear, Henry interjected immediately. His voice was calm and condescending, but I noticed the muscle in his jaw tighten for a second. This evening is, of course, our treat. Arthur immediately reached across the table and covered my hand with his face filled with concern for my discomfort. Becky, honey, I told you not to think about the prices. Just order whatever you want. I slowly raised my gaze to his, letting my eyes get just a little misty, a classic tears of gratitude move. You're all just so incredibly kind to me, I whispered, this time genuinely quiet, but with a perfectly calculated tremor in my voice. I'm so nervous and I want this night to be perfect. I just want you to like me. My voice broke on the last word. It was brilliant. Eleanor, Arthur's mother, set down her menu and leaned forward. She arranged her face into what she clearly believed was an expression of maternal warmth. Becky, dear, her voice was smooth and well-rehearsed, tell us a little about yourself. Arthur mentioned you're in public relations? I immediately slipped back into character. Oh, yes. I tried to make it sound a little too enthusiastic. I work for a small firm, Citywide Media Solutions. Nothing, glamorous. I mostly help organize events for local shop openings and things like that. I modestly dropped my gaze to my lap. Arthur always says I'm great at it, but to be honest, I sometimes doubt I have enough, grit for the real business world, like all of you. It worked. I physically saw the family's collective tension ease. They relaxed. Eleanor leaned back in her chair, Henry gave a slight nod, as if diagnosing me. The verdict was clear, sweet, but completely harmless and, frankly, dim. Olivia, who until this point had been giving me nothing but icy stares, allowed herself to smile for the first time. It was a condescending smile. You know how sometimes at a family dinner, you just have to bite your tongue? Sometimes the best strategy in a game is to pretend you don't even know the rules. The evening rolled on as scripted, and the Henderson family's true colors began to show, like stains on a tablecloth. Eleanor took charge of ordering the wine. She didn't even glance in my direction, simply held a brief, quiet consultation with the sommelier. I caught the name, it was a bottle that cost more than my fictional monthly rent. When the sommelier filled my glass, Eleanor raised hers for a toast. "I do hope you enjoy this, Becky," she said. "It's a very approachable vintage. I thought it would be a good start for someone who perhaps doesn't experiment with different wines all that often." I cautiously brought the glass to my lips, took a tiny, almost frightened sip, and feigned shock at the complexity of the bouquet. "Wow," I exhaled. "It's so strong." Yes, very nice. Not at all what I'm used to." Olivia immediately seized on the bait. She let out a short, tinkling laugh, a sound as sharp as broken glass and utterly devoid of mirth. "And what are you used to, Becky, if you don't mind me asking?" she inquired, her curiosity blatantly mocking. "Oh, well." I pretended to be terribly embarrassed and stared down at my napkin. "Well, honestly, I usually just grab whatever's on sale at the grocery store. Sometimes even box wine," I giggled guiltily. "Arthur tries so hard to develop my palate, but I think I'm just a hopeless case." Under the table, I felt Arthur's hand tighten on mine. He looked miserable. I could see that classic struggle in his eyes. He was embarrassed by his family, but he had been raised never to challenge them publicly. He was torn between wanting to defend me and his lifelong loyalty to the clan. Henry, the father, decided to change the subject, but not the vector of attack. He gave a short, businesslike cough. "And where did you receive your education, Becky?" "Oh, I went to State University," I reported brightly. In reality, I graduated from Yale, but that was my little secret. It's no Ivy League, like Arthur, of course, but I was just so happy to get a degree and not drown in student loans. I paused dramatically, looking at the table. "Well, I still have some debt, unfortunately. But Arthur, he's just been so supportive. He's helped me so much with advice on how to budget and manage it all." I shot Arthur a look of pure adoration. The unsaid, but crystal clear, implication hung in the air. Arthur wasn't just giving me advice. He was, essentially, financially supporting his cute but utterly hopeless little project. Eleanor's condescending smile, which seemed to be glued to her face, became even more pronounced as she sipped her wine. She looked at me with the special kind of approval one reserves for a capable, but not too gifted, child. "It's just wonderful," she said. "How well you seem to be managing." "On your own." "It's very respectable." When the waiter silently placed an appetizer in front of me, some incredibly complex salad, I performed my next move. I froze, staring at the intimidating array of silverware flanking the plate. I glanced from the forks to Arthur, my eyes wide with mock panic, as if pleading for a hint. Of course, Olivia, sitting opposite, noticed the hesitation instantly. She barely suppressed a sigh. The smaller one, on the left. "That's for the salad, dear," she said, enunciating slowly and clearly, as if explaining hygiene to a 5-year-old. "Oh, thank you." I breathed, feigning immense relief. Gosh, I'm so hopeless at this. At home, well, we didn't really do all these formalities. We usually just ate in the kitchen. After that, the conversation flowed into a channel clearly designed to highlight the chasm between their world and mine. They began discussing their recent ski vacation in Aspen, an upcoming gala at the art museum, where Eleanor, of course, was on the committee, and mutual acquaintances with last names that regularly appeared in the society pages. I played my part flawlessly, ooing and ahing in all the right places, asking the most naive questions about their travels, and widening my eyes in admiration of their sophisticated lifestyle. About halfway through dinner, as the main courses arrived, Eleanor decided to move in for the kill. Her mask of politeness showed its first noticeable crack. "Arthur says you've been together for 2 years," she stated, making a precise incision into her perfect filet mignon. She looked up at me, her gaze as sharp as her knife. "That's quite a long time. Things are getting serious, aren't they?" "Oh, yes. For me, it's more than serious," I replied, immediately turning to Arthur with the most adoring look I could conjure. "Honestly, I still sometimes can't believe a man like Arthur would even, well, notice someone like me." Someone like you? Henry immediately picked up, setting down his fork. His business radar had caught a signal. I made a vague gesture toward my red dress. Well, you know. Simple. An ordinary girl. Arthur could date anyone. A girl from your circle. Someone with, well, the right family, the right connections. I leaned forward and lowered my voice, as if sharing a terrible secret. To be honest, I worry all the time that I'm holding him back. This was exactly what Olivia had been waiting for. She pounced on my words. Holding him back? She repeated, with a sudden, sharp interest. What do you mean by that, Becky? I bit my lower lip tragically and looked away, as if ashamed and pained to admit it. Arthur has such important events for his work. Meetings with partners, charity dinners. And just to be there, you have to look appropriate. Those dresses, the donations everyone makes. It's so much money. I looked at Arthur with an expression of martyred love and placed my hand over his. He is, of course, the most generous man in the world. He's always offering to help me, to buy me an outfit or make a contribution. But I can't. I just can't let him spend so much on me. It wouldn't be right. A complex mixture of emotions crossed Eleanor's face. On one hand, it looked like sympathy, but deep in her eyes, I caught a cold, assessing glint. She was weighing me. She drawled, that difference in station must create certain inconveniences for you both. Oh, I try my best not to dwell on it, I replied, forcing a brave smile. Arthur always tells me that real feelings are so much more important than all those material things, and I want to believe that with all my heart. I took a shaky, trembling breath, as if holding back emotions. And I do. Even when at some events, his friends look at me like I've accidentally wandered into the wrong room. This admission triggered a new wave of silent communication at the table. They exchanged glances again, but this time, their looks held complete understanding. I could almost hear the gears turning in their heads. Their verdict was obvious: poor, sweet Arthur. So naive. He's trapped himself with a girl who could never, under any circumstances, be a part of his world. Henry, the father, leaned back in his massive chair and crossed his arms, assuming the air of a wise patriarch. Arthur has always had a big heart, he said thoughtfully, gazing somewhere over my head. Sometimes his kindness borders on imprudence. He's always been generous, at times even to his own detriment. The comment was delivered as a simple observation, but it was a shot aimed directly at me. Under the table, I felt Arthur's fingers crush my hand. I shot him a quick look and saw anger flash in his eyes. He was already opening his mouth to object to his father, but I beat him to it. I quickly interjected, turning to Henry with an expression of absolute, sincere reverence. You are so right, Mr. Henderson. He truly is the kindest, most generous man I know. I thank my lucky stars for him every single day, and I still don't know what I did to deserve such happiness. My enthusiastic self-deprecation worked like a balm on their wounded pride. They relaxed again. I had agreed with them, and this seemed to fully confirm their initial assessment. I understood my modest place in this food chain perfectly. As the waiters cleared the plates and brought the dessert menus, Eleanor decided it was time for the main blow. She delicately dabbed her lips with her napkin and placed it on the table. Becky, dear, she began in a soft, almost motherly tone. I do hope my words don't sound harsh. But as Arthur's mother, I feel I simply must clarify something. Arthur, next to me, instantly went rigid, like a taut string. Mom, please, don't. He started in a warning tone. She stopped him with a single gesture, a light but imperious raise of her manicured hand. Arthur, darling, I believe this is necessary. She refocused her gaze on me, her face full of false kindness. You see, Becky. Arthur was born into a very specific world. His life, his career, his entire future, it's inextricably linked to certain expectations. To a certain level of responsibility that he carries for our family. I put on my most pure and innocent expression of confusion. I'm not sure I understand, Mrs. Henderson. At this point, Olivia chimed in, her voice as sharp and precise as a surgical instrument. She decided to help her mother get the point across without mincing words. What Mother is trying to say delicately, Becky, she said with a cold smile, is that Arthur has always been expected to his wife. His life partner would be cut from the same cloth. Someone who can support his lifestyle. Someone who instinctively understands the complex social obligations that come with his position. I let my face slowly fall. My strained smile melted away, replaced by an expression of shock and sudden, painful realization. Oh. I breathed out quietly. I see. I understand. I slowly turned my head to Arthur, who by this point was crimson with suppressed rage. To be honest, I never looked at it that way. This isn't a personal criticism of you, Henry quickly inserted. You seem like a pleasant person, but sometimes feelings alone aren't enough to bridge certain disparities. That word, disparities, hung over the table, creating an oppressive atmosphere. I could feel Arthur about to explode to defend me, but I squeezed his hand tightly under the tablecloth. It was time to let them show their true natures. I appreciate your directness, I said in a hushed tone, adding a slight tremor to my voice to feign suppressed, but dignified, hurt. I think, deep down, I always knew this question would come up one day. Eleanor's face took on an expression that she must have thought looked like sympathy. You're handling this with great dignity, my dear. It speaks to your maturity. My only wish is for Arthur's happiness, I whispered, sliding into the role of the magnanimous girl ready to make a sacrifice. Even if it means I have to. I didn't finish the sentence, letting them fill in the blank, and saw pure relief wash over their faces. They were sure of their victory. They believed they had managed to convince a simple, ignorant girl to step aside for the good of their son. Arthur sat beside me, perfectly still, clenching his jaw so hard it was visible. He hadn't said a word, apparently stunned by his family's behavior and my submissive reaction. The moment the main course plates were cleared, I excused myself to the ladies' room. It was time for the final part of my plan, and I needed a minute to prepare for the finale. Once in the privacy of the luxurious restroom, I looked at my reflection, adjusting my overly bright lipstick, and mentally prepared for the end of this performance, which could end in either my complete success or a resounding failure. The woman who attended the ladies' room, named Gloria, who had worked at La Serafina 4 years, recognized me immediately, despite the masquerade. Miss Becky, she said in a near whisper, a note of surprise in her voice, what an unusual look for you tonight. I met her gaze in the mirror and smiled warmly. Gloria, sometimes in life, you just have to put on a little show. She nodded knowingly. Well, the timing is certainly good. Mr. Serafino will be beside himself to see you. He was just telling the manager this morning that the new wing is almost ready, and it's all thanks to your support. I pulled a $50 bill from my purse and handed it to her. Could you do something for me? In exactly 15 minutes, please find Mr. Serafino and ask him to spare a moment for the guests at table 18. Let him know it's very important. I returned to the table just as the dessert menus were being presented. Eleanor didn't wait for me to sit down and continued her moralizing lecture, which was clearly in full swing. It was about family legacy and the importance of choosing a partner who matches their level. I glanced at Arthur. He was as dark as a thundercloud, it looked like he was about to either explode or just get up and leave. Ah, you're just in time, Becky, Eleanor said, not even slowing her didactic tone. I was just explaining to Arthur some of the nuances of our family's way of life, which he may have neglected to mention. I sat down, adrenaline coursing through my veins. The end was near. That sounds very educational. I've always thought traditions are so important. Olivia, catching my feigned interest, smiled at me the way one smiles at an ignorant child. For example, we have a family heirloom. A ring, she drawled. It's passed down, but, of course, only to brides who fully share our values and come from a suitable background. The message was as clear as day. I saw Arthur clench his fists in pain under the table, but I beat him to it. What a touching and beautiful tradition. I cooed, looking at Olivia with admiration. I'm sure whoever Arthur eventually chooses will be incredibly proud of such an honor. My submissiveness and willingness to know my place clearly delighted Eleanor. Exactly, my dear. Your understanding is very commendable. It shows your maturity. Then Henry spoke up again, apparently deciding to solidify their success. We also mustn't forget about social standing, he said gravely. Arthur's life and career involve constant circulation in very specific, influential circles. His life partner must feel completely natural there, like a fish in water. I shook my head sympathetically, looking at Arthur. I can't even imagine. It must be so much pressure. Constantly having to make an impression, always be at the top of your game. Precisely. Eleanor brightened, pleased with my quick uptake. Take this evening, for example. La Serafina isn't just a restaurant where one dines. It is, if you will, an arena. Deals are made here, connections are built. For someone unprepared, an outsider, such an atmosphere might seem, to put it mildly, uncomfortable. At that moment, Arthur's patience finally snapped. He didn't shout or make a scene. He just looked directly at his mother and said 2 words. Quietly, but so that the silence rang. Mom. Stop. I feigned a sudden realization and leaned forward slightly, looking at Eleanor. My goodness, Mrs. Henderson, you're absolutely right. I never would have thought places like this were so important for business. Arthur never mentioned that people network here, too. Olivia let out a short laugh. Oh, Arthur is just being modest. But the truth is, the connections you make at La Serafina can define your entire career. Absolutely everyone who is anyone in this city knows the owner, Mr. Serafino. Amazing, I breathed, feigning awe. He must be an incredibly influential man to run such an exclusive place. He is, Henry confirmed with a note of respect in his voice. Mr. Serafino is a true model of a self-made man. He started small and built this empire through hard work and a very wise choice of partners. Eleanor nodded knowingly. Exactly. He's precisely the kind of person who understands how important it is to surround yourself with the right people. I could see Arthur was in agony over this conversation. He was torn between wanting to protect me and not wanting to cause a scene. His loyalty to me was obvious, but I needed him to hold on just a little longer. Everything was going exactly according to my script. It must take a special gift to create something like this from scratch, I said thoughtfully. And I'm sure he's very discerning about who he does business with and invests in. The Hendersons exchanged self-satisfied glances. They were convinced I had finally grasped the importance of their world and that I had no place in it. And at that very moment, as if on cue, Mr. Serafino himself appeared at our table, just as dessert was being served. He was an impressive figure, gray hair, an impeccably tailored suit, and an aura of calm authority combined with old-world charm. Good evening, he said, his voice warm, a slight French accent adding a particular flair to his words. I trust, monsieur and madams, you are enjoying your evening at my humble establishment. Eleanor practically transformed upon seeing him. A delighted smile bloomed on her face. Oh, Mr. Serafino, how wonderful. The evening, as always in your restaurant, is simply superb. Everything is flawless. He gave her a polite but reserved smile. Madam Henderson, you are, as always, too kind. Mr. Henderson, a pleasure to welcome you again. His professional gaze swept over Olivia, then Arthur, and finally, came to rest directly on me. I watched him in that moment. I saw a tiny spark of recognition flicker in his eyes, which was immediately replaced by an almost imperceptible, but clear, astonishment. He was too experienced to let his face give him away, but I understood, he had instantly taken in my ridiculous, garish outfit and the entire strangeness of the situation. And this charming young lady, you must not have had the chance to introduce me to, he said very carefully, addressing Arthur. Arthur immediately sat up straighter, his face beaming with pride. Mr. Serafino, allow me to introduce my girlfriend, Becky. Becky, this is Mr. Serafino, the owner of this incredible place. I timidly extended my hand, putting an expression of awe and nervousness on my face. Mr. Serafino, it's such an honor. I've never seen anything like it. It's so elegant here. Mr. Serafino gently took my outstretched hand. I felt his fingers grip mine for a moment, just a fraction tighter than etiquette required. It was our silent signal, a sign that he recognized me and understood the game. The pleasure is all mine, mademoiselle. He paused, questioningly. Clark, I supplied quickly, Becky Clark. His eyebrows twitched almost imperceptibly when he heard the name. Clark. How lovely. He held my hand for another second, pretending to study my face intently, as if trying to remember something. You know, he drawled thoughtfully, your face seems so familiar. It's remarkable. Are you certain we haven't met before? Eleanor let out a short, condescending laugh. Oh, I highly doubt that, Mr. Serafino. Becky, shall we say, doesn't typically frequent establishments of your caliber. Her patronizing tone was deafening. Mr. Serafino's polite smile faded slightly. He had clearly caught the note of arrogance in her voice. Is that so? He asked very quietly, his gaze shifting from Eleanor to me. The air instantly became tense, as if thunder was about to break. He didn't say anything himself, instead, he gave me the floor, ceding complete control over what happened next. I don't believe we've had the pleasure of being formally introduced, I said, still playing my modest role. Although, you're right, your face looks familiar to me, too. Mr. Serafino smiled at me. Perhaps you saw a report in the business press? We've been making a lot of noise lately, thanks to our new expansion. How interesting, Eleanor said politely, but without much enthusiasm. Oh, it's more than interesting. He continued, his eyes fixed on me. This entire breakthrough was made possible by one single, very astute investor. A person who believed in my project when no one else would, and financed the whole thing. Arthur looked completely baffled by this business report, and Eleanor was starting to lose patience. Well, what a delightful success story, Mr. Serafino. Now, if you'll excuse us, we were hoping to discuss. One moment, madam, his voice firmed, his smile sharpened. He turned from her and addressed me directly. I simply cannot miss the opportunity to personally greet my most important partner. The silence at the table was deafening. Miss Becky, he continued warmly, I'm so glad you could stop by. I was just about to let you know that your last wire transfer allowed us to close the deal on 3 new properties. Everything is going splendidly, thank you. The words fell onto the table like a block of ice. I saw Arthur's face change in a split second from confusion to absolute shock, and then to something resembling awe. The mask of perfect civility on Eleanor's face simply cracked and crumbled. Henry and Olivia froze, their mouths half open. Did I hear you correctly? Eleanor stammered, her voice trembling. Did you say partner? Mr. Serafino stopped smiling. His face instantly became serious and utterly professional. He pointedly looked past Eleanor and addressed me directly. My apologies, madam, he said, speaking to her but not looking at her, but I approached this table for one reason, and one reason only. I could not pass up the chance to personally pay my respects to the most important person dining in my establishment tonight. He paused and looked directly at me with warm respect. Mademoiselle Clark. I am so glad you found the time to visit us. I was just sending you an email this morning with the reports on those 3 new properties we were able to acquire, thanks to your latest wire transfer. Everything is proceeding exactly on schedule. The silence that fell on the table was absolute. It was so thick you could almost touch it. Arthur slowly turned his head toward me, his eyes wide, his face a mask of complete bewilderment. Becky, his voice was barely audible. What is he talking about? I slowly placed my dessert fork down on the plate. All my feigned timidity, all the trembling in my voice, it all vanished, as if I had shed a heavy coat. I looked around at the frozen, shocked faces of Henry, Olivia, and Eleanor. My voice, when I spoke, was calm, clear, and perfectly steady. He's talking about the fact, Arthur, that your family has spent this entire evening trying to very politely explain to me that I could never be a part of your world. I paused, looking directly into Eleanor's eyes. What an irony. It turns out, you're the ones dining in my world tonight. In your? Was all Eleanor could manage to say. Her face had gone pale. I nodded to Mr. Serafino. If you would be so kind as to clarify the situation for my guests. Of course, he replied immediately. To put it simply, Mademoiselle Clark is the primary investor and majority stakeholder in the entire La Serafina holding company. That includes the land under all our restaurants, and 45% of the operational business. He looked at the petrified family. To be even simpler, this restaurant belongs to her every bit as much as it belongs to me. An absolute, stony silence reigned at the table. Olivia, who looked as if she had just been doused with ice water, was the first to speak. But, your job? She stammered, staring at me with wide eyes. You said, you're in public relations? I allowed myself a smile, this time, calm and confident. I am. I owned Citywide Media Solutions. Only it's not just an event planning firm. It's my private investment holding company. We find promising businesses, like La Serafina, and invest millions in their development, helping them reach the next level. Arthur turned to me, a storm of emotions on his face. He looked at me as if he was truly seeing me for the first time. Becky, why? His voice was quiet, almost a whisper. Why didn't you just tell me? I took his hand, and for the first time this entire endless evening, my smile was 100% genuine and warm. Because I desperately needed to know that you fell in love with me, I said, looking into his eyes. Just Becky, the girl from the park. Not Becky with the 8-figure trust fund. And tonight, Arthur, tonight you proved to me that you love me. You were ready to go against all of them for me. Then I shifted my gaze to his family, who were still sitting in a complete stupor, unable to say a word. As for you. My voice turned cold and hard. Arthur is the best, kindest man I have ever met. He deserves to be loved and supported. And instead, he has a family that is so obsessed with status and appearances that you were willing to humiliate me and hurt your own son, just to preserve your pretentious social standing. Eleanor looked pale. Her composure had completely evaporated. We didn't know. You didn't want to know, I cut her off, my voice ringing with righteous anger. You didn't know because you didn't even try to know. You made up your mind about me the second I walked into this room. You saw my dress and decided I was vulgar. You heard State University and decided I was stupid. You decided I was after your son's money, and you treated me with a contempt you didn't even bother to hide. Henry looked as if he was going to be sick, all his former self-assurance had evaporated. Miss Clark. He mumbled, we offer you our sincerest apologies. We made a grievous error in judgment. An error? I asked calmly. Not at all. You didn't make an error. You were perfectly honest tonight and showed me your true selves. You are people who judge others by the size of their wallet and their family tree. You are people for whom love and kindness will always come second to social status. Arthur, who had been sitting in shock this whole time, squeezed my hand tightly. Becky, I am so ashamed, his voice broke. I had no idea they were capable of this. Shoo, I turned to him, my voice softening. You have nothing to apologize for. You've done nothing wrong. You were on my side all evening and were horrified by their behavior. I swept my icy gaze back over the table. But now, Arthur, you have a decision to make. Are you ready to build a life with me, knowing your family will always see me as less than? Or are you finally ready to draw a line? Eleanor seemed to be in a state of genuine panic. No, no, not at all. We want to fix this. We would be delighted to get to know you. No, I cut her off firmly, not letting her finish. That ship has sailed. You missed your chance the second you decided I was a nobody you could wipe your feet on. You showed me who you are when you think you have the power. I am not the kind of person who forgets that. At that moment, Mr. Serafino, who had witnessed the entire scene, stepped forward delicately. Mademoiselle Clark, your private lounge is entirely at your disposal. I've given instructions for champagne and desserts to be served there, as soon as you are ready to continue your evening in a more private setting. I smiled at him and turned to Arthur, whose eyes had not left mine. So? Shall we try starting this evening over from the beginning? He shot to his feet as if launched by a spring and pulled me to him. I've never wanted anything more in my life. We turned and walked away from the table, leaving the three of them sitting in the deafening silence of their failure. As we were approaching the exit of the dining room, I heard Olivia's panicked whisper to her mother, "Mom, do you have any idea what we just did?" "Oh yes," I thought to myself as we walked into the lobby, a satisfied smile on my face. I think it's just beginning to dawn on them. This dinner wasn't a game for me, it was a test. I desperately needed to know, did Arthur love me, or was he, like all the others, just waiting for the moment to see my money? He passed his test. He fell in love with Simple Becky and was willing to go against his entire family to protect me. His family, on the other hand, failed spectacularly. They passed judgment on me the second I walked in. Seeing my garish dress, they decided I was beneath them. They spent the whole evening condescendingly explaining to me that I wasn't good enough for their world. What an irony. They were lecturing me on the rules of the elite while sitting in a restaurant that only exists because of my money. They were praising the owner, not knowing he was my business partner. Their panicked apologies at the end meant nothing. They weren't apologizing for being cruel, they were apologizing for misjudging my wealth. And that's the ultimate lesson: people show their true colors not in how they treat their equals, but in how they treat those they think are powerless. They were willing to accept me not because I turned out to be a good person, but because I turned out to be richer than them.